Dr. Veltar stared at the datapad in his 4 hands and felt his crystalline skin dim with disappointment. After 20 years of studying the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, the Galactic Academic Council was giving him this assignment: humans, a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. The meeting room at the Galactic University was cold and quiet. Professor Kethara, the department head, watched Veltar with her large purple eyes. She was patient, but Veltar could tell she expected him to complain. "With respect, Professor," Veltar said, his voice making a soft ringing sound like most Zephyrians, "I have spent my career studying the Void Hunters of Sector 9 and the Battleworms of the Outer Rim. Why are you asking me to research a species that can barely lift twice their body weight?" Professor Kethara moved her tentacles in what humans might call a shrug. "The Council has its reasons, Dr. Veltar. The humans may seem simple, but they have made contact with our civilization. We need to understand them." Veltar looked at the basic facts on his datapad. Humans lived on a planet called Earth 317. They had only developed space travel in the last 100 of their years. Compared to most species, they were weak, slow, and died young. Their planet was mostly water, and they needed to breathe a specific mix of gases to survive. "What could be interesting about them?" Veltar asked. "They have no natural weapons, no armor on their skin. They cannot even see in the dark without tools." "That is what you need to find out," Professor Kethara said. "The Council wants a complete study. Behavior patterns, social structures, military tactics, everything." Veltar sighed, a sound like wind through crystal caves. "How long do I have?" 6 months. "Your first report is due in 2 months. After the meeting, Veltar walked through the university halls to his laboratory. The building was huge, with rooms for researchers from dozens of different species. Through the windows he could see 3 moons in the purple sky of Axiom Prime. Other scientists passed by, some floating, some walking on 6 legs, some sliding along the walls. His laboratory was on the 15th floor. It was a large room filled with computers, screens, and research equipment. Veltar had spent many happy years here, learning about the most feared creatures in known space. Now he would be studying a species that most scientists considered boring. He activated his main computer and began downloading files about humans. The first thing he noticed was how young they were as a species. Most galactic civilizations had millions of years of history. Humans had only developed writing 5,000 years ago. Their first contact with galactic civilization had happened just 3 years ago. A human ship called the Explorer had encountered a trading vessel near their solar system. The humans had been cautious but friendly. Captain Li Huan, the human in charge, had followed all proper first contact protocols without even knowing what they were. Veltar read the transcript of that first meeting. Captain Li Huan had been calm and respectful, even though he was meeting aliens for the first time. When the traders offered to take him to meet the Galactic Council, he had agreed immediately. "Interesting," Veltar said to himself. Most species were terrified during first contact, but the humans seemed excited. He continued reading. Dr. Park Mina, a human scientist, had been the first of her species to visit the Galactic University. She had spent 6 months learning about other civilizations. Her reports about human culture were detailed and honest. She did not try to make her species seem more important than they were. Veltar found this strange. Most species tried to appear powerful when they first joined galactic society. They wanted to seem like valuable allies or dangerous enemies, but the humans seemed content to admit they were new and weak. Over the next few days, Veltar dove deeper into the research. He learned that humans lived in groups they called nations on their planet. These nations often fought each other, but they also helped each other during disasters. When earthquakes or storms hit one area, humans from other areas would travel there to help even if they were strangers. This behavior puzzled Veltar. In most species, individuals only helped their immediate family or tribe. But humans would risk their lives for people they had never met, simply because they were the same species. He found records of something humans called wars. These were large conflicts between their nations. Veltar expected to read about efficient military strategies, like the ones used by the Krallian Empire or the Dominion forces. Instead, he found something else entirely. Human soldiers did things that made no logical sense. They would charge into enemy fire to rescue wounded friends. They would stay behind to delay enemies while others escaped, knowing they would probably die. They would share their food with prisoners, even when they did not have enough for themselves. Veltar read one report about a human soldier named Kim Tae-ho. During a battle, Kim Tae-ho had seen enemy soldiers about to attack a group of civilians. Instead of retreating to safety, he had charged at the enemy alone. He was badly wounded, but he delayed them long enough for the civilians to escape. "This behavior is not logical," Veltar said to his research assistant, a young Zephyrian named Rinda. "Why would he risk his life for strangers?" Rinda looked at the data. "Maybe their brains work differently than ours." Veltar made notes in his research files. Human behavior was becoming more interesting than he had expected, but he still did not understand why the Council wanted such a detailed study of them. They were clearly not a military threat to anyone. As the days passed, Veltar found more examples of strange human behavior. He read about scientists like Choi Yuna, who had worked for 30 years to develop medicine for a disease that did not affect her personally. He learned about teachers who spent their own money to buy supplies for their students. He read about ordinary humans who jumped into dangerous rivers to save drowning strangers. Each story was small, but together they painted a picture of a species that acted against their own survival instincts on a regular basis. Veltar had studied hundreds of intelligent species, but he had never seen anything like this pattern of behavior. 2 weeks into his research, Veltar received a message from an old colleague, Dr. Zephan, who worked in the military analysis department. "I heard you are studying the humans," the message said. "Interesting timing. There have been some encounters with them in the border sectors. Nothing official, but the reports are unusual." Veltar immediately contacted Dr. Zephan. They met in the university cafeteria, a large room where dozens of species ate their different foods. "What kind of encounters?" Veltar asked. Dr. Zephan lowered his voice. 3 times in the past year, Dominion scout ships have tried to test human defenses. All 3 times the humans have fought them off. "That seems normal," Veltar said. "Every species defends itself." "That is not the unusual part," Dr. Zephan continued. "The unusual part is how they fought. The humans were completely outmatched. The Dominion ships were bigger, faster, and had better weapons. By all military logic, the humans should have surrendered or been destroyed. But they were not. No. Each time the humans used tactics that should not have worked. They sacrificed their larger ships to protect smaller ones. They sent damaged ships on collision courses with enemy vessels. In one battle, a human captain named Admiral Ro Seung-jin ordered his entire crew to abandon ship, then flew his ship directly into a Dominion cruiser to save a civilian transport. Veltar felt his skin brighten with curiosity. "And this worked?" "Every time." The Dominion scouts retreated. "My sources say the Dominion command is confused. They do not understand how to fight an enemy that treats their own lives as expendable." That night, Veltar stayed late in his laboratory, thinking about what he had learned. Humans were not physically strong, but they seemed to have something else. Something that made them willing to die for others, even strangers. He began to suspect that his assignment was not as simple as it seemed. The Council did not usually waste resources studying weak species. There had to be a reason they wanted to understand humans so badly. As Veltar prepared to leave his laboratory, he looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were living their short lives on their small planet, probably not knowing that anyone was studying them. He had started this research thinking humans were boring. Now he was beginning to think they might be the most dangerous species he had ever studied, not because they were strong, but because of something much more frightening. They seemed to be completely unafraid of death. 3 weeks into his research, Veltar had filled 7 data storage units with information about humans. The more he learned, the more disturbed he became. Not because humans were evil or dangerous in the usual way, but because their behavior made no sense according to any known model of intelligent life. He was reviewing combat footage when his assistant Rinda brought him a cup of heated mineral water. The footage showed a human military unit during what they called the Battle of New Seoul on their colony world. "Watch this carefully," Veltar told Rinda, pointing at the screen with one of his 4 arms. "The human commander is Commander Kim Tae-ho. His unit is completely surrounded by enemy forces. They have no chance of winning." On the screen, they could see Kim Tae-ho talking to his soldiers. The audio was translated into Galactic Standard. "We cannot retreat," Kim Tae-ho was saying. "If we run, the civilians in the city will die. We hold this position no matter what." Rinda watched as the enemy forces began their attack. The humans were outnumbered 5 to 1. Their weapons were older and less powerful. Any logical military leader would have ordered a retreat to save his soldiers' lives. Instead, Kim Tae-ho's unit fought harder. When their ammunition ran low, they used hand-to-hand combat. When soldiers were wounded, others carried them while continuing to fight. When their defensive positions were destroyed, they built new ones from the wreckage. "This is the part that makes no sense," Veltar said. He fast-forwarded to near the end of the battle. "Watch what happens when Kim Tae-ho is mortally wounded." On the screen they could see the human commander hit by enemy fire. He was clearly dying. Any rational being would use their last moments to escape or surrender. Instead, Kim Tae-ho used his final breaths to call for an artillery strike on his own position. He killed himself and his remaining soldiers to stop the enemy, Veltar explained. The explosion delayed the enemy long enough for reinforcements to arrive and save the civilians. Rinda stared at the screen in confusion. But why? The civilians were not his family. Most of them were not even from his nation. "That is exactly what I am trying to understand," Veltar said. He had found dozens of similar examples. A human scientist named Choi Yuna had stayed behind during a laboratory evacuation to manually shut down a dangerous reactor. She knew she would die from radiation exposure, but her actions saved thousands of people in the surrounding area. Another human, a teacher named Park Ji-won, had hidden 30 children in her school's basement when enemy soldiers attacked their town. When the soldiers found the school, she told them the children had already been evacuated. The soldiers killed her, but they believed her lie and left without searching further. All 30 children survived. Veltar found records of humans jumping into freezing water to save drowning strangers. He read about firefighters who ran into burning buildings to rescue people they had never met. He learned about medical workers who treated patients during dangerous disease outbreaks, knowing they might get sick themselves. This behavior exists at every level of their society, Veltar explained to Professor Cathara during his first monthly report. It is not just soldiers or emergency workers. Ordinary humans regularly risk their lives for others. Professor Cathara listened carefully.
"Have you found any explanation for this behavior?"
"Several," Veltar said. "Humans have concepts they call heroism and sacrifice. They teach their children that dying for others is honorable. They create stories about heroes who save people. They give awards to individuals who risk their lives for strangers. That explains the cultural encouragement," the professor said, "but not the biological basis. Most species have strong survival instincts that prevent this kind of behavior." Veltar activated his data display. "That is where it gets interesting. I found research by a human psychologist named Dr. Bae Hyan. She studied what humans call altruistic behavior. According to her work, humans have a biological drive to protect their group that overrides individual survival instincts." "How large is their group?" Professor Cathara asked. "That is the remarkable part," Veltar said. "For most species, the protective group includes only immediate family or close tribe members. For humans, the group can include their entire species, and sometimes even other species." Veltar showed footage of humans rescuing animals from natural disasters. He had records of humans risking their lives to save creatures that could not possibly help them in return. Some humans even formed organizations dedicated to protecting animals they had never seen on planets they had never visited. "I found one case," Veltar continued, "of a human named Kang Jisoo who spent her entire fortune building medical facilities on alien worlds. She helped species that most humans will never meet." Professor Cathara's tentacles moved in thought. This level of altruism should have been eliminated by natural selection. Individuals who sacrifice themselves for others should not survive to pass on their genes. Dr. Bae Hyun's research suggests the opposite, Veltar explained. According to her studies, human groups with more altruistic members were more likely to survive disasters and conflicts. The individuals might die, but the group became stronger. Over the following weeks, Veltar dove deeper into human military history. He studied their wars, their battles, and their strategies. What he found disturbed him more than any predator he had ever researched. Humans fought in ways that broke every rule of military logic. They would attack positions they could not win to buy time for retreating civilians. They would share supplies with enemies who were wounded. They would refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. In one battle, a human general named Yang Minho had been surrounded by enemy forces for 2 months. His army was starving and running out of ammunition. Any rational commander would have negotiated a surrender to save his soldiers' lives. Instead, Yang Minho had sent a message to the enemy commander. "We will not surrender," the message said. "Every day you waste trying to capture us is another day our people have to prepare their defenses. We will fight until the last person falls." The enemy commander had tried to starve them out, but Yang Minho's forces had eaten grass and tree bark to survive. They had made weapons from scrap metal when their guns broke. When the enemy finally overran their position, they found Yang Minho and his soldiers still fighting with improvised spears and rocks. The tactical impact was enormous, Veltar noted in his research files. Yang Minho's refusal to surrender delayed the enemy advance by 2 months. This gave other human forces time to prepare a defense that eventually won the war. But military tactics were not the most disturbing thing Veltar discovered. The more frightening pattern was how humans treated other species. Every galactic civilization had rules about first contact with new species. Most were designed to determine if the new species was useful as an ally or dangerous as an enemy. Humans seemed to operate by completely different rules. When humans encountered their first alien species, a group of traders called the Malori, the human response was immediate offers of friendship and aid. The Malori were struggling with a disease that was killing their children. Human medical teams volunteered to help, even though they knew nothing about Malori biology and risked exposing themselves to unknown pathogens. Dr. Park Mina, the human scientist who had visited the university, had spent months developing treatments for Malori diseases. She had risked her life testing medicines on herself when computer simulations were not enough. She did this for a species she had just met, Veltar explained to Rinda. There was no possible benefit to humans. The Malori had nothing humans needed, but Dr. Park Mina acted as if their children were her own. Veltar found similar examples throughout human history. When they encountered the Kef refugees whose planet had been destroyed, humans immediately offered them sanctuary. Human families adopted Kef children and raised them as their own offspring. When the Altarian science station had an accident that left researchers stranded in space, human ships had volunteered for a rescue mission that required flying through dangerous radiation fields. 3 human crew members had died from radiation exposure, but they saved 17 Altarian scientists. This behavior extends beyond their own species, Veltar noted. Humans seem to have a protective instinct that includes any being they perceive as needing help. As his research continued, Veltar began to notice something that made him uncomfortable. News reports were coming in about increased Dominion activity in the outer sectors. The militaristic alliance was expanding its territory more aggressively than usual. Several border worlds had gone silent in the past month. Trading ships reported seeing large Dominion fleets moving toward the inner systems. The Galactic Council was calling emergency sessions to discuss the threat. Veltar tried to focus on his research, but he could not shake the feeling that his work was somehow connected to these events. Why would the Council want detailed information about human behavior patterns right when the Dominion was becoming more active? He decided to dig deeper into the encounters between humans and Dominion forces. What he found made his crystalline skin dim with worry. The Dominion had not just tested human defenses 3 times. They had tested them 17 times over the past 2 years. Each encounter had been carefully recorded by Dominion intelligence units. The emergency alarm that woke Veltar from his sleep was not a drill. The harsh red lights flashing through his apartment windows told him something terrible was happening. He rushed to his communication device and activated the university's emergency channel. Professor Kethara's face appeared on the screen, her usually calm expression replaced by obvious fear. "All faculty and students must report to evacuation stations immediately," she announced. "The Dominion has launched a massive assault on 7 sectors simultaneously. Axiom Prime is directly in their path." Veltar felt his crystalline skin turn cold. He had spent the last 6 weeks studying humans and watching Dominion movements, but he had not expected the attack to come so soon or so close to home. He gathered his most important research files and rushed to the university. The hallways were filled with panicking students and faculty from dozens of different species. Some were floating quickly through the air, others were running on multiple legs, and a few were slithering along the walls in their hurry to reach safety. The evacuation center was chaos. Hundreds of beings were trying to get on transport ships that could only hold a fraction of their number. University officials were trying to organize the evacuation by priority. Essential personnel and rare research materials would go first. Everyone else would have to wait. Veltar found Professor Kithera near the communication station. She was receiving constant updates from the outer sectors. The news was all bad. How long do we have? Veltar asked. The Dominion fleets will reach us in 3 days, Professor Kithara replied. Maybe less if they do not stop to secure the worlds they have already taken. Veltar watched the evacuation lists being updated. His name was near the bottom. As a researcher studying a minor species, he was not considered essential personnel. He would probably be on one of the last ships to leave. If there were any ships left by then. Professor, Veltar said, I need to tell you something about my human research. Professor Kethara looked at him with tired eyes. Unless it can help us fight the Dominion, it will have to wait. That is exactly what I need to discuss, Veltar said. He showed her his datapad with the classified Dominion intelligence reports he had found. I think my research was never about academic understanding. Someone wanted to know how to defeat humans. Professor Kethara read the reports quickly. Her tentacles went rigid with shock. These are classified military documents. How did you access them? University database clearance, Veltar explained. I was researching human Dominion encounters and found these files. The Dominion has been studying human tactics for 2 years. They are looking for weaknesses. What kind of weaknesses? Veltar activated his research summary. Humans will sacrifice themselves to protect others. The Dominion believes they can use this against them. If they threaten civilian populations, human military forces will move into disadvantageous positions to protect them. Professor Kethera was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated her personal communication device. I need to speak with Council Member Zarthek immediately. Emergency priority. While they waited for the call to connect, Veltar continued his explanation. There is something else, Professor. The Dominion reports mention that they have been avoiding direct confrontation with human forces because their tactics are too unpredictable. But they think they have found a solution. What solution? Overwhelming force applied to multiple targets simultaneously. If they attack enough places at once, humans cannot protect everyone. The Dominion believes this will break human morale and force them to surrender. Council Member Zarthek appeared on the communication screen. He was an ancient Altarian with silver skin and eyes like deep wells. Professor Kethara, I assume you are calling about the evacuation schedule? No. Council Member, Dr. Veltar has discovered something about the Dominion strategy that you need to hear. Veltar explained his findings to the Council Member. He showed the intelligence reports and his analysis of human behavior patterns. Council Member Zarthek listened without interruption. Dr. Veltar, the Council Member said when he finished, your research was commissioned by the Defense Committee, not the Academic Council. We needed to understand human capabilities because we hoped to recruit them as allies against the Dominion. Then why was I not told? Veltar asked. Because we needed objective analysis. If you had known the military purpose, your research might have been influenced by what we hoped to find rather than what was actually true. Veltar felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that he had not been helping the enemy, but fear because his research had revealed how dangerous the current situation really was. Council Member, Veltar said, based on my research, I do not think the humans will be able to help us. They are brave, but the Dominion has overwhelming numerical superiority. Human tactics work in small conflicts, but not against this scale of assault. Council Member Zarthek nodded grimly. That is what our military advisors have concluded as well. The human fleet is already engaged in 3 different sectors, trying to protect their colonies and allied species. They cannot help defend the core worlds. Over the next 2 days, Veltar watched the situation get worse. Reports came in from the outer sectors every few hours. The Dominion was advancing faster than anyone had expected. They were not stopping to secure conquered worlds. They were driving straight toward the heart of galactic civilization. Veltar spent his time organizing his research files and helping with the evacuation. Many of the transport ships had already left, carrying the most important personnel and equipment to safety. Those who remained were mostly researchers like himself, graduate students and support staff. He was working in his laboratory, preparing his final research summary when Rinda burst through the door. Dr. Veltar, she said, her voice high with excitement. You need to see the latest intelligence reports. Something has changed. Veltar followed her to the communication center. On the main screen, they could see a tactical display of the entire conflict zone. The Dominion fleets were still advancing, but something was different about their formation. What am I looking at? Feltar asked. The Dominion just redirected 3 of their main fleets, explained Dr. Morden, the military liaison. Instead of continuing toward the core worlds, they have turned toward the human sectors. Feltar studied the display. That makes no strategic sense. The human sectors are not important targets. Why would they waste time and resources attacking them when they could capture the council worlds? That is what we thought too, Dr. Morden said. But then we received this transmission. A new screen activated showing a human face. Feltar recognized him from his research files. Captain Han Jiho, commander of the human Deep Space Fleet. This is Captain Han Jiho to all Galactic Council forces, the recording said. We have received word that Dominion fleets are approaching Council core worlds, while most defense forces are engaged in the outer sectors. We are redirecting our entire fleet to assist in the defense of Axiom Prime and the surrounding systems. Feltar stared at the screen in disbelief. He cannot be serious. If human forces leave their own sectors, the Dominion will capture all human colonies. That is exactly what they are doing, Dr. Morden confirmed. Every human military ship is heading toward the core worlds. They are abandoning their own territory to protect ours. Professor Cathara appeared beside them. This is why the Dominion redirected their fleets. They are going to capture all human worlds while the human fleet is away protecting us. Feltar felt his skin brighten with understanding. The Dominion has used human nature against them. They knew humans would prioritize protecting others over protecting themselves. Now they can capture human territory without a fight. It gets worse, Dr. Morden said. He activated another screen showing casualty reports. The human fleet is already engaged with Dominion forces in Sector 7. They are fighting a delaying action to buy time for our evacuation. They are taking heavy losses. Feltar watched the tactical display as small blue dots representing human ships winked out one by one. Each dot represented hundreds of human lives. People like the soldiers and scientists he had studied for the past 2 months. People who were dying to protect beings they had never met. This is exactly what I predicted in my research, Feltar said quietly. Humans will sacrifice themselves to protect others, even when it means losing everything they care about. You studied them for 2 months, Professor Cathara said. Is there anything in your research that could help them? Feltar thought about everything he had learned. The stories of human heroism and sacrifice, the tactical analyses of human military actions, the psychological profiles of human behavior patterns. No, he said finally. The only thing that makes humans effective is their willingness to die for others. But that same quality is what the Dominion is using to destroy them. As the hours passed, more reports came in. The human fleet was fighting desperately to slow the Dominion advance. They were using the same tactics Feltar had studied, sacrificing larger ships to protect smaller ones, staying behind to delay enemies while others escaped, refusing to retreat even when facing impossible odds. It was working, but at a terrible cost. For every hour they delayed the Dominion, dozens of human ships were destroyed. The human fleet was being systematically. The Dominion arrived 6 hours ahead of schedule. Feltar was in his laboratory making final copies of his human research when the building shook from the impact of orbital bombardment. Through his window he could see bright flashes of light as enemy ships destroyed the planet's defense satellites. The evacuation had been going too slowly. There were still thousands of beings on Axiom Prime when the attack began. The university's communication system crackled with emergency messages. All remaining personnel report to shelter areas immediately. Dominion landing forces are approaching the surface. This is not a drill. Feltar grabbed his research files and ran toward the nearest shelter. The hallways were filled with smoke and the sounds of distant explosions. Emergency lights cast strange shadows as beings of dozens of species rushed toward safety. The shelter was in the lower levels of the university. It was designed to hold 500 people, but nearly 800 beings were crowded inside when Feltar arrived. He found a spot near the back wall next to Dr. Lyra, an elderly Altarian physicist, and Zix, a young Corvian engineer. How long can we stay here? Zix asked, his feathers ruffled with fear. Dr. Lyra checked her portable scanner. The shelter has enough air and power for 3 days if we are careful. But I do not think we will need to worry about supplies. Why not? Feltar asked. Because the Dominion does not usually leave survivors when they capture research facilities. Dr. Lyra said quietly. They will either take us as prisoners for interrogation, or they will eliminate us to prevent us from sharing what we know. The bombardment continued for 2 hours. Each impact made the ground shake and sent dust falling from the ceiling. Some of the younger students were crying. Others sat in silence, holding personal items or communication devices that no longer worked. Veltar tried to stay calm by focusing on his research. He reviewed his files about human behavior, thinking about the patterns he had discovered. Humans always fought hardest when they were protecting others. They never gave up even when facing certain death. They treated sacrifice as an honor rather than a tragedy. "It is strange," he said to Dr. Lyra. "I have spent months studying human courage, and now I am discovering how much courage I lack." Dr. Lyra looked at him with her large silver eyes. "What do you mean?" "Humans would not be sitting in a shelter waiting to die," Veltar explained. "They would be looking for ways to fight back or to help others escape or to delay the enemy. They would not accept defeat. We are not warriors," Dr. Lyra pointed out. "We are researchers and teachers." "So was Dr. Park Mina," Veltar said. "So was Choi Yuna. Being a civilian never stopped humans from acting like heroes when others needed help." The bombardment suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, they could hear new sounds, the hum of landing craft and the heavy footsteps of Dominion soldiers moving through the building above them. Someone in the front of the shelter was monitoring the communication channels. "Dominion ground forces have taken control of the surface," they announced. "They are searching the building level by level." Veltar realized they had perhaps an hour before the soldiers found the shelter. He looked around at the frightened faces surrounding him. Most of these beings were some of the greatest minds in the galaxy. Physicists who understood the secrets of space and time, biologists who had cataloged life on thousands of worlds, engineers who designed the ships that traveled between stars. All of them were about to die or be captured because they could not think like humans. "Dr. Lyra," Veltar said, "is there any way to send a transmission from down here?" "The main communication array was destroyed in the bombardment," she replied. "But there might be some emergency beacons in the utility areas." "What good would a transmission do?" Zix asked. "There is no one left to hear it." Veltar activated his datapad and showed them the tactical display he had been monitoring. "The human fleet is still fighting in Sector 7. They are only 40 light-years from here." 40 light-years might as well be 40,000, Dr. Lyra said. "Even if they received a distress call, they could not arrive in time to help us." "Maybe not," Veltar agreed. "But according to my research, humans always try to help, even when success is impossible. If we can get word to them that civilians are trapped here, they will come." Zix's feathers ruffled with skepticism. "You want to base our survival on the behavior patterns of a species you have only studied in files?" "Yes," Veltar said simply, "because everything I have learned tells me that humans do not abandon people who need help." Dr. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up. "There is an emergency beacon in the maintenance section 2 levels down. If we can reach it without being detected, we might be able to send a message." "That is suicide," someone else in the shelter said. "The soldiers will catch us before we get halfway there. Then we stay here and die anyway," Veltar replied. "At least this way we are trying to help ourselves." Dr. Lyra led Veltar and Zix through the maintenance tunnels beneath the university. The passages were narrow and dark, designed for repair robots rather than living beings. They could hear Dominion soldiers moving through the floors above them, searching rooms and capturing anyone they found. The emergency beacon was in a small utility room filled with power conduits and environmental control systems. Dr. Lyra activated the device while Veltar prepared his message. "This is Dr. Veltar of the Galactic University on Axiom Prime," he spoke into the transmitter. "Dominion forces have captured the planet. Approximately 800 civilian researchers are trapped in the university shelter. We are requesting immediate evacuation assistance." He paused, then added something that would either save them or doom them. "I have completed detailed research on human tactical and behavioral patterns. This information must not fall into Dominion hands." Dr. Lyra sent the message on all emergency frequencies, then quickly shut down the beacon. "Now we wait," she said. They made their way back to the shelter through the maintenance tunnels. The trip took longer because they had to avoid several areas where they could hear Dominion soldiers above them. When they finally reached the shelter, they found the situation had gotten worse. They found the shelter entrance 20 minutes ago. one of the researchers reported. They are trying to cut through the security doors. Veltar could hear the high-pitched whine of cutting tools coming from the ceiling. The Dominion soldiers were working steadily to break through the reinforced barriers that protected the shelter. How long until they get through? Zix asked. Maybe 30 minutes, Dr. Lyra estimated. Veltar sat down and tried to calculate travel times in his head. Even if the humans had received his message immediately, even if they had ships close enough to help, even if they abandoned their current mission to come to Axiom Prime, they could not arrive for at least 6 hours. The mathematics were clear. The humans could not save them. But Veltar had learned something important during his research. Humans did not always follow mathematics. They followed hope. The cutting sounds from above grew louder. Some of the people in the shelter were crying now. Others were praying to the various gods of their homeworlds. A few were recording final messages to their families. Veltar activated his datapad and reviewed his research one more time. He read about Kim Tae-ho, who had fought impossible odds to protect civilians. He read about Choi Yuna, who had sacrificed herself to save thousands of strangers. He read about Yang Minho, who had held a position for 2 months against overwhelming enemy forces. All of them had faced situations that seemed hopeless. All of them had fought anyway. If humans were here, Veltar said to Dr. Lyra, what would they do? Dr. Lyra thought about the question. Based on your research, they would look for a way to fight back even if victory was impossible. Veltar looked around the shelter, 800 of the galaxy's greatest minds hiding in a basement, waiting to be captured or killed. It was not what humans would do. The emergency beacon, he said suddenly. Can we overload it? What do you mean? Dr. Lyra asked. Turn it into a weapon. Overload the power systems and create an explosion. Zix stared at him. That would destroy this entire section of the building. We would all die. Yes, Veltar agreed. But we would take some of the Dominion soldiers with us. And more importantly, we would destroy my research before they could use it against humans. Dr. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. It would be a very human thing to do, she said finally. Above them, the cutting sound suddenly stopped. In the silence, they could hear Dominion soldiers preparing to breach the shelter. Veltar stood up and looked around at the 800 beings who had trusted him enough to send a message to the humans. All of them were going to die in the next few minutes. The only question was whether their deaths would mean something. I am going back to the beacon, he announced. Anyone who wants to come with me is welcome. Anyone who wants to stay here is also welcome. But I will not let the Dominion use my research to hurt humans. To his surprise, Dr. Lyra stood up. I will come with you. Then Zix stood up. And me. One by one, others began to stand. Not all of them. Some were too frightened or too injured or simply chose a different path. But more than half the shelter's population stood up and prepared to follow Veltar back to the emergency beacon. As they prepared to leave the shelter, Veltar realized something. Veltar was halfway through the maintenance tunnel, leading 400 volunteers toward what they all knew was certain death. When the explosion started above them, the sound was different from the Dominion bombardment. These explosions came in rapid sequences, followed by the distinctive whine of energy weapons and the heavy impacts of something large hitting the building. Through the utility shafts, they could hear Dominion soldiers shouting orders in their harsh language. What is happening up there? Dr. Lyra asked. Veltar pressed his ear to the tunnel wall. Among the sounds of battle, he could hear something that made his crystalline skin brighten with impossible hope. Human voices speaking in their quick, efficient military language. Contact right 50 meters. Zix, take your squad and flank them from the stairwell. Roger that, Sergeant. Moving now. Be careful, those are civilians in that room. Check your targets. Veltar grabbed Dr. Lyra's arm. The humans came, he whispered. They actually came. Above them, the battle was intense but brief. Human soldiers moved through the building with deadly efficiency, clearing out Dominion forces room by room. Veltar could hear the tactical communications as the humans coordinated their attack. Building secured, Sergeant O. We found the shelter entrance. Looks like the Dominion was trying to cut through the doors. Good, get those doors open. Command says there are 800 civilians down there. Sergeant, we have a problem. The Dominion set charges around the shelter entrance. If we trigger them wrong, we could collapse the whole level. Then do not trigger them wrong. Private Nam. We did not come this far to lose people to bad demolition work. Veltar and his group hurried back toward the shelter. When they arrived, they found the security doors standing open, and human soldiers helping civilians out of the underground refuge. The soldiers moved with calm professionalism, checking each person for injuries and guiding them toward the surface. Sergeant Oh Dayun was a compact woman with short black hair and alert dark eyes. She was directing the evacuation while simultaneously coordinating with other units throughout the building. When she saw Veltar, she immediately approached him. "Are you Dr. Veltar?" she asked. "Yes," Veltar replied, surprised that she knew his name. "Captain Han Jiho wants to speak with you immediately. We received your transmission about research that could not fall into Dominion hands." Veltar followed Sergeant Oh through the building to a temporary command post the humans had set up in what used to be the university's main lecture hall. The room was filled with human soldiers, communication equipment, and tactical displays showing the situation across the planet. Captain Han Jiho was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of calm confidence that Veltar had read about in his research files. He was studying a holographic map of the surrounding area while receiving reports from his units. "Dr. Veltar," Captain Han said without looking up from the map, "I hope your research was worth the lives of 37 human soldiers." Veltar felt his skin dim with shame. "Captain, I never intended—" "Relax, Doctor," Captain Han said, finally looking at him with a slight smile. "I am not blaming you. I am just pointing out that humans do expensive things when civilians are in danger." "How did you get here so fast?" Veltar asked. "My calculations showed it was impossible." "Your calculations assumed we would follow normal military procedures," Captain Han explained. "We did not. When we received your distress call, I ordered an immediate emergency jump to this system. We arrived with engines overheating, weapons barely charged, and enough fuel for exactly one assault." Veltar stared at him. "You risked your entire fleet on a rescue mission?" "Not my entire fleet," Captain Han corrected. "Just the ships that could make the jump in time. 12 vessels total. We left the rest behind to continue the fighting in Sector 7. Private Nam Jiwan approached the captain. She was young, barely out of training, but she moved with the same confident professionalism as the veteran soldiers. "Sir, we have secured the university and evacuated all civilians. Dominion reinforcements are approaching from the north." Captain Han studied his tactical display. "How many ships?" "At least 20. Maybe more." Veltar looked at the display and felt his hope disappear. 12 human ships against 20 or more Dominion vessels. The humans had saved the civilians, but now they were trapped themselves. "Captain," Veltar said, "you should retreat while you still can. Your mission is complete." Captain Han looked at him with the expression Veltar had seen in dozens of research files. The look humans got when someone suggested abandoning people who needed help. "Doctor, there are still civilians on this planet. Dominion forces have rounded up thousands of people in the capital city. We are not leaving until we get them out too." "That is impossible," Veltar protested. "You do not have enough ships or soldiers." "Probably not," Captain Han agreed. "But we are going to try anyway." Over the next hour, Veltar watched the humans prepare for what should have been a suicide mission. They divided their small force into even smaller units. Some would create diversions to draw Dominion attention away from the capital. Others would infiltrate the city to locate and evacuate civilian prisoners. "This is exactly what I wrote about in my research," Veltar told Sergeant Oh as they prepared to board a transport. "Humans always choose the impossible mission if it means helping others." "Your research sounds accurate," Sergeant Oh replied. "Though I am curious, why were you studying us in the first place?" Veltar explained about his assignment from the Council and his discovery that the research was meant to help understand human military capabilities. He told her about finding the Dominion intelligence reports and realizing that human behavior patterns were being studied by both sides. "So you know how we think," Sergeant O said. "That means you can predict what we will do next." "Yes," Veltar said. "You will attack the prison facility even though you are outnumbered. You will take heavy casualties trying to evacuate civilians you have never met. Many of you will die, but you will keep fighting until everyone is safe or until there are no humans left to fight." Sergeant O was quiet for a moment. "And knowing all that, you still chose to come with us instead of evacuating to safety." Veltar realized she was right. When the humans had offered to take him to their ship for immediate evacuation, he had instead asked to accompany the rescue mission. He had not consciously decided to do it. The choice had felt automatic. I think, Veltar said slowly, that studying humans for 2 months has changed how I think about what is important. The rescue mission was exactly as chaotic and dangerous as Veltar had predicted. Human soldiers fought through overwhelming Dominion forces to reach the prison facilities. They used every tactic he had documented in his research: sacrifice larger ships to protect smaller ones, stay behind to delay enemies while others escaped, refuse to abandon anyone no matter the cost. Private Nam Jiwan was killed holding a choke point so that evacuating civilians could reach the transport ships. She was 19 years old. Veltar had watched her joke with other soldiers just hours earlier. Sergeant O was wounded when she used her own body to shield a group of Altarian children from an explosion. She kept fighting with a broken arm and severe burns, directing her squad until all the children were safely on board the rescue ships. Captain Han Jiho made the same choice that Yang Minho had made in the historical battle Veltar had studied. When Dominion reinforcements arrived and threatened to overwhelm the rescue operation, Han Jiho ordered his ship to ram the largest enemy vessel. The explosion disabled 3 Dominion cruisers and gave the rescue ships time to escape. Veltar found himself on one of the last transport ships to leave Axiom Prime. As they flew away from the planet, he looked back at the burning university, where he had spent the happiest years of his life, the building where he had learned to understand the most remarkable species in the galaxy. How many made it out? He asked the ship's pilot. All the civilians, the pilot replied. Every single one. Captain Han made sure of that. And how many humans? The pilot was quiet for a long moment. Not enough. 6 months later, Veltar was working at a new research facility on the planet Haven. The Galactic Council had given him a new assignment: develop training programs based on human tactical and behavioral patterns. His research was being used to teach other species how to fight like humans when protecting civilians. He was reviewing reports from recent battles when he received a transmission that made his crystalline skin brighten with joy. Captain Han Jiho appeared on his communication screen, looking older and more tired but very much alive. Dr. Veltar, Han said with a smile, I heard you are teaching the galaxy how to be heroes. I am teaching them what you taught me, Veltar replied, that some things are worth dying for. Actually, Han said, I think you learned something more important than that. What? Some things are worth living for. You chose to help people instead of just studying them. That is the most human thing anyone can do. Veltar thought about the 800 researchers in the shelter, the thousands of civilians in the prison camps, and the young human soldiers who had died to save people they had never met. He thought about Private Nam Jiwon, who had given her life for strangers, and Sergeant Oh Dayun, who had shielded children with her own body. Captain, Veltar said, I have spent my